Buenos días. Yo soy el señor Morris. ¿Cómo están ustedes? Today, we'll be reviewing some of the things that we've been studying up to now in this unit, and then we'll talk about the time zones found here in the United States. Pero primero, vamos a cantar nuestra canción de saludos. Canten conmigo. Hola, buenos días. ¿Cómo están ustedes? ¿Cómo se sienten? Yo me siento bien. Muy bien cantado. Well, I tell you what, let's go ahead and start today's lesson with a review of what we were talking about in the last class, the landforms. Now, you should have these in your notebooks. You can go ahead and take out your notebooks if you want to as we go over these right now. This first one, here we go. Got some big things here. You can go hiking or camping in these. If you remember what these are called, raise your hand and count to 3, and tell your teacher before I count to 3. 1, 2, 3. Las montañas. Repitan todos. And if you didn't get those in your notebooks last time, you might want to go ahead and do it now. Another place that we talked about that you probably see in this fine country of ours are places like this. We've got big bodies of water. Yeah, you can go fishing or sailing or boating, skiing. Do you remember what this is called? Raise your hand and tell your teacher before I count to 3. 1, 2, 3. El lago. Can you say that? El lago. Muy bien. Go ahead and make sure you've got these all down. Another place that we looked at was this. Again, it's got water, but this time it's running water, running along in a channel somewhere. And I bet the students who live in El Paso or along the border there in Texas know what this is, because there's a big river that kind of has this name. Tell your teacher if you think you know before I count to 3. 1, 2, 3. El río. And you get to roll that R. Since the word starts with an R, you roll that. El río. Repitan todos. And when you write this out, don't forget, you've got your accent mark right there. Okay. One other place that we looked at was this one. Oh, yeah. Nice, nice vacation destination. I bet you guys see a lot of this down in Florida, along the Gulf Coast of Texas, out in California. Yeah, do you remember what this is called? Tell your teacher before I count to 3, because I'm going to start counting right now. 1, 2, 3. La playa. Repitan todos. Okay. One other place that we looked at was this. This one. Out in the middle of nowhere, and we said this word is almost like the word in English, only you take off the 2 last letters, don't you? So raise your hand and tell your teacher. 1, 2, 3. La isla. Repitan todos. Okay. Another one that we talked about was this place here. Yeah, a lot of this around here in the southwest. This is kind of a cognate, so it's pretty easy. Raise your hands. Tell your teachers. 1, 2, 3. El desierto. El desierto. Okay. And then we looked at this type of landform. Yeah. A lot of trees. Generally a lot of animals living around this. This looks kind of like Flagstaff even. What do you call this kind of area? Raise your hand, tell your teacher by the time I count to 3. 1, 2, 3. El bosque. El bosque. Make sure you have that written down. And we went over these last time when we did our activity sheet. So hopefully you've seen those a couple of times now, and you're starting to get to the point where at least you can recognize them. Okay. But that's recognizing things. Another thing that we've been looking at in this unit, which you should really easily do now, is the cardinal and the intermediate directions. Okay? Here we are. We're going to start off with los puntos cardinales. And we're going to go through this pretty quickly because you guys should know this. Okay, raise your hand if you know what this is called in Spanish, this direction. Uno, dos, tres, norte. I hope you got that right. How about this one? Raise your hand. Tell your teacher. Uno, dos, tres, este. Este. Okay. How about down here? Uno, dos, tres, sur. Sur. How about this one over in this direction, where the sun sets every evening? Uno, dos, tres, oeste. Oeste. Well, you guys should probably be pretty familiar with those now. And these, los puntos intermedios, should be no problem at all. I'm going to kind of help you out by giving you the letters that belong up here. Okay? And you tell me what this direction is in between. Okay, figure it out. Raise your hand. Tell your teacher. By the time I count 2, 3. Uno, dos, tres. Noreste. Noreste. Okay. And this one? In between these two. Uno, dos, tres. Sureste. Sureste. Okay. How about this one? In between these two. Can you figure that out? It's pretty easy once you get the idea down and just putting the names together. By the time I count 2, tres. Uno, dos, tres. Suroeste. Suroeste. And here we go. This last one up here. Everybody raise your hand. Tell your teacher. Loud voice. Uno, dos, tres. Noroeste. All right. Well, hopefully those are so familiar to you now that you're saying, "Ay, Senor Moris, not those again. I know those backwards and forwards." That's great, because when we come to the evaluation at the end of this unit, you're going to say, "Oh, that again?" And you're all going to do really well on the evaluation. Now, if you've ever watched a sporting event or an award ceremony of any type on television, you've probably heard the announcer say something like this, starting at 8 Eastern, 7 Central, and 6 Pacific, or whatever they say, okay? Or if you've ever called a relative that lives pretty far away from you, you might have said something like this. You might say, "Oh, well, let's see. It's 2 o'clock here, and that must be 2 hours later, so it must be 4 o'clock there." Have you ever done that? You have to change the time. Pues esos son los usos horarios. Usos horarios, or time zones. Vamos a ver aquí en el mapa los usos horarios en los Estados Unidos de América. Okay. Well, let's see. How many time zones are there? ¿Cuántos usos horarios hay? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Hay 6 usos horarios en los Estados Unidos de América. Right, there's 6 of them. And you probably can recognize some of these. This first one here that we're going to talk about is over in this direction. And now you remember that we talked about the cardinal directions, north, south, east, west. Well, this one is over towards the east, so this is Eastern time, y en español es la hora del este. La hora del este. Okay. Now, here, this is kind of in the center of the country, isn't it? This is kind of in the center. So this is in English the central time zone, right? The central time zone. Y en español es la hora central. And you don't really have to worry about writing these down because we're going to see these on the activity sheet. So you don't really have to worry about writing them down, but if you can recognize where they belong, that's terrific. This next time zone here, okay, the Rocky Mountains are run kind of along in here, okay, so, and this is the state of Montana, right? So this is the mountain time zone in English, y en español es la hora de montaña, la hora de montaña. Okay? Remember we were talking about state names? Montaña, mountain, and this is the hour of the mountains, or mountain time. Over here, we have this time zone, and it's along this ocean, which is the Pacific Ocean. So this is called in English the Pacific time zone. Y en español es la hora del Pacífico. La hora del Pacífico. Okay? And that makes sense because it's right there along the Pacific Ocean. This next one that we see, now this state is so big that we had to put it down here in just a representation of it. But it's in this time zone, and this time zone is named for this state. It's the Alaska time zone in English. Y en español es la hora de Alaska, or Alaskan time. La hora de Alaska, and that should make sense. And then down here we have this other state that's an island in the United States, and it is this time zone, and also some of these islands that come out here off Alaska, they're called the Aleutian Islands. So this is the Hawaii Aleutian time zone in English. Y en español es la hora de Hawaii Aleutianas. And that's how they say Aleutians, Aleutianas. So I'm not going to ask you guys to be able to say that one because that is kind of a tough word, but I want you to recognize that this time zone here is going to be Hawaii and the Aleutian Islands. Okay? Now, on these time zones, the time changes. Mientras vas al oeste, quitas horas. So when you go to the west, you take hours away. Mientras vas al este, la más tarde que es. So when you go back towards the east, it's a little bit later. So let's see this right now on our map that we were talking about. We can see up here that on the eastern zone, it's 6 o'clock. When it's 6 o'clock in the eastern zone, it's 5 o'clock, I'm sorry, 5 o'clock. And when it's 5 o'clock in the eastern zone, it's going to be 4 o'clock Central Time and 3 o'clock Mountain Time, 2 o'clock Pacific Time, 1 o'clock Alaskan Time, and 12 o'clock Hawaiian Aleutian Time. Okay, so you see you lose hours as you go towards the west, and you have to add more. So, if it is 3 o'clock here in California, what time is it going to be in Arizona? We're going to the east, so we're going to add an hour, so it's going to be 4 o'clock. Okay? And if it's, let's see, if it's 12 o'clock here in Oklahoma, what time is it in Alaska? Well, let's see, 12, 11, 10, 9. You take the hours away. So, see if you can identify what time zone your state is in. Okay? And one of the things that we can do to help us go over that is to look at our activity sheet. So, ahora sacan la hoja de actividades llamada los usos horarios. Los usos horarios, or the time zones. Let's look at that now. Okay. Here's mine. I'm going to go ahead and write my name. R-O-B-E-R-T-O, Roberto. Now, the directions say, using the map of the time zones, answer the questions at the bottom of the page. Remember, going west, you subtract 1 hour for each time zone, and going east, you add 1 hour for each time zone. Well, these questions start off pretty easy. ¿En qué uso horario está California? Okay. ¿En qué uso horario está California? So what we have to do is look at the map of the United States here and be able to identify that state. California está aquí. What time zone? Here it is, la hora del Pacífico. So when we answer this, está en la hora del Pacífico. And don't forget your accents. Pacífico. ¿En qué uso horario está California? Está en la hora del Pacífico. And it's going to ask you about a couple of states here. Now down further it's going to say, if it's 5 o'clock in Delaware, what time is it in Washington State? So you have to be able to know where Delaware is. And if I'm not mistaken, it's right around here. So 5, 4, 3, and here's Washington State. So that's going to be what time? So it's got a couple of questions like that for you. And then down at the bottom it says, maybe you can make up a question about time conversion to ask your classmates. Okay? So that'll give you a chance to go over that. And I don't want you to memorize where all those are, but if you can recognize it. La hora del este, la hora del Pacífico, those things, they should be pretty easy. Now remember to keep practicing those things and they'll get easier and easier for you. We went over some of the things that we've been studying in this unit and learned a little bit about the time zones in Spanish. Pero saben que ya es hora de despedirnos. For our goodbye song today, I'd like to sing La Cucaracha, but let me tell you what the words mean. Todas las muchachas tienen, all the young girls have, en los ojos, dos estrellas. They have 2 stars in their eyes. Pero las mexicanitas, but the little Mexican girls, de seguro son más bellas, are certainly more beautiful than any others. This song's from Mexico. And then they sing, La cucaracha, la cucaracha. Do you know what that is? The cockroach. Ya no quiere caminar. He doesn't want to walk. Porque no tiene, porque le falta, because he doesn't have any, because he's lacking dinero para gastar, money to spend. Well, now if you translate it, it doesn't make a lot of sense, but it's still a pretty cool song, and it's our goodbye song for today. Canten conmigo. Todas las muchachas tienen en los ojos 2 estrellas, pero las mexicanitas de seguro son más bellas. La cucaracha, ya no quiere caminar, porque no tiene, porque le falta dinero para gastar. You can find that one in your music books to sing whenever you want. You keep practicing until next time, and when we see each other, we'll learn some more. Until then, adios, nos vemos.